On April 2nd, 2025, from the Rose Garden of the White House, President Donald Trump unleashed what may be the most consequential economic policy shift of the 21st century. In a single announcement, he erected the highest tariff wall around America since the late 1800s. A 10% universal tariff on all imports, plus dramatically higher reciprocal rates targeting specific countries. As he unveiled the rates country by country, the magnitude became clear. 20% for the European Union, 26% for India, 34% for China, bringing total Chinese tariffs to 54% when combined with existing duties, 46% for Vietnam, and a staggering 49% for Cambodia. What Trump called a declaration of economic independence represents nothing less than America's wholesale abandonment of the global trading system it helped build after World War II. According to CNBC, stock futures plummeted immediately, with the Dow dropping over 1,000 points and shares of multinational companies like Nike and Apple falling about 7% in after-hours trading. The ripple effects are spreading across financial markets, diplomatic channels, and corporate boardrooms worldwide, raising profound questions about the future of global commerce and cooperation. To understand the significance of this moment, we must look at what's ending. For nearly 80 years, America served as guardian of an increasingly open global trading system. This order, formalized with the creation of the World Trade Organization in 1995, was built on the principle of non-discrimination, that trading partners should treat each other equally. The reaction across Asia reveals a complex strategic recalculation. Japan, facing a 24% tariff, has warned that all options are on the table regarding retaliation, while simultaneously restarting trade talks with China, negotiations that had been paused for 5 years. South Korea's acting president Han Duck-soo has ordered emergency support measures for industries and businesses impacted by the tariffs, according to CNBC. Vietnam, hit with a punishing 46% tariff, finds itself in a particularly vulnerable position. The country had become a primary beneficiary of manufacturing shifts away from China during previous trade tensions, with numerous multinationals relocating production there. Now, Vietnamese officials face the devastating prospect of becoming collateral damage in America's broader trade war. India's position is especially nuanced. Despite receiving a 26% tariff, India finds itself in a relatively better position than many Asian neighbors. According to NPR, Indian officials had been hoping to capitalize on tensions between the US and China by attracting manufacturing that was leaving China. Now, with Prime Minister Narendra Modi's close relationship with Trump being tested, India must navigate complex negotiations while protecting its emerging economy. The economic consequences of these tariffs could be severe. Mark Zandi, chief economist at Moody's Analytics, warns that a recession is inevitable if these policies are fully implemented. According to the Washington Post, Zandi forecasts unemployment potentially peaking at 7.3% by early 2027, with stocks losing a quarter of their value and more than 5 million jobs disappearing. What makes these tariffs particularly damaging is their comprehensive nature. Unlike targeted tariffs aimed at specific industries or practices, these blanket measures affect virtually all imports across all sectors. According to Tax Foundation analysis, even before these new tariffs, the combined effect of Trump's previous steel, aluminum, and automotive tariffs was projected to reduce US GDP by 0.4% and eliminate over 220,000 jobs. And that was before this much larger escalation. The White House, however, has rejected these dire predictions. The administration argues that similar warnings proved wrong during Trump's first term, when more limited tariffs failed to derail economic growth. Trump's economic team, led by Chair of the Council of Economic Advisers Stephen Moran, contends that as the world's largest source of consumer demand, the US holds all the leverage, suggesting foreign suppliers will absorb most of the costs, rather than passing them to American consumers. Beyond immediate economic impacts lies a more profound transformation, a fundamental rewiring of the global economic order that has prevailed since 1945. As The Economist reports, America's role in global trade has actually been declining for decades. The US now accounts for just 12% of global imports, down from 20% at the start of the century. Meanwhile, new trade blocs have been forming that could potentially thrive without American participation. Two emerging groups are particularly significant. First, what The Economist calls open market allies, including Japan, South Korea, Canada, Australia, and the European Union, collectively account for over a third of global import demand, far more than America and China combined. Second, strategic hedgers like Brazil, India, Indonesia, and Turkey are pursuing pragmatic trade policies that balance relations with both East and West. The current crisis is accelerating integration between these blocs. Since Trump's election, the EU has updated trade deals with Chile and Mexico, reopened negotiations with Malaysia, and expedited talks with the Philippines, Thailand, and the UAE. Most significantly, after 25 years of delay, a deal between the EU and Mercosur, South America's trading bloc, is finally nearing completion, creating a market of over 700 million consumers. Perhaps the most unexpected consequence of Trump's tariffs is the opening they provide for China. As Washington raises barriers, Beijing sees strategic opportunity. Multiple countries that previously aligned with America on trade policy are now reconsidering their options. Japan and South Korea resumed trade talks with China on March 30th after a 5-year pause, a shift from Trump's first term when Japan, the EU, and America united to confront Chinese trade practices. China is actively courting trading partners through multiple channels. It has applied to join the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP. Ironically, a trade agreement originally designed by the United States under the Obama administration before Trump withdrew from it during his first term. China is also expanding the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP, which links China to the ASEAN countries, plus Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. According to Reuters, countries like Australia and Chile, which each send over 30% of their exports to China, may be increasingly willing to strengthen ties with Beijing if Washington becomes an unreliable trading partner. Even India, despite border tensions with China, may consider strengthening economic ties. On April 1st, China's ambassador to India indicated openness to importing more Indian goods. Europe finds itself in a particularly difficult position. Faced with a 20% tariff on all exports to America, EU leadership is pursuing a dual strategy, preparing retaliatory measures while maintaining diplomatic channels. According to Reuters, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen told the European Parliament on April 1st that the bloc stands ready to retaliate against American services exports, including those from big tech firms, a departure from previous trade conflicts that focused mainly on goods. But Europe's response is complicated by internal divisions. France and Poland, with their strong agricultural and manufacturing sectors, are hesitant to escalate tensions. Meanwhile, Germany, with its export-driven economy and particularly its auto industry, faces severe consequences from Trump's separate 25% tariff on automobiles. The auto tariff alone could cost Germany's economy billions of euros annually. European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde captured Europe's strategic dilemma in remarkably direct terms, noting that everyone benefited from a hegemon, the United States, that was committed to a multilateral rules-based order. Now, she warns, we must contend with closure, fragmentation, and uncertainty. The domestic political dimension adds another layer of complexity. In the US Senate, a bipartisan rebuke emerged hours after Trump's announcement when legislation was passed that would terminate new tariffs on Canada. While largely symbolic, this action signals potential resistance from Congress as the economic consequences of tariffs become apparent. Congressional Democrats are taking a particularly strong stance. According to NBC News, Democratic senators held a press conference highlighting the inflationary impact of tariffs and their disproportionate effect on lower-income Americans. This framing attempts to counter Trump's populist economic message by positioning tariffs as a regressive tax that hurts the working class. The political calculus is complicated by recent economic data. In March, consumer confidence dropped to its lowest level since 2021, according to ABC News, with many Americans expressing concern about potential price increases. If inflation accelerates and growth slows, Republicans may face increasing pressure to moderate Trump's trade agenda ahead of the 2026 midterm elections. History offers sobering lessons about trade wars. The most infamous example, the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930, is widely regarded by historians as having deepened and prolonged the Great Depression. According to the National Bureau of Economic Research, after those tariffs were implemented, U.S. exports dropped by 61% as trading partners retaliated with their own tariffs. More recent examples reveal similar patterns. Reagan-era semiconductor tariffs on Japan in the 1980s contributed to Japan's lost decade of economic stagnation. The Obama-era tire tariffs against China saved perhaps 1,200 U.S. jobs, but cost American consumers over $1 billion in higher prices, according to Peterson Institute analysis, amounting to over $800,000 per job saved. What's striking in reviewing these historical cases is that virtually all ended with more economic losers than winners, and usually with diplomatic harm that outlasted any economic benefit. As Dr. Ravindran A.M., an economist cited by Policy Circle, notes, economic nationalism driven by short-term political gains leads to instability and economic inefficiency. Despite overwhelming skepticism from mainstream economists, there are those who argue that Trump's approach has merit. The White House points to steel tariffs from Trump's first term as evidence of success. According to a White House fact sheet, those tariffs led to a wave in investment across the United States, with more than $10 billion committed to build new mills and helped revitalize communities dependent on steel production. Some economists outside the administration have also challenged the conventional wisdom. The Economic Policy Institute contends that tariffs implemented during Trump's first term clearly showed no correlation with inflation and had only a fleeting effect on overall prices. A 2023 report by the U.S. International Trade Commission found that Trump's Section 232 and 301 tariffs effectively stimulated more U.S. production of affected goods, while having very minor effects on downstream prices. More fundamentally, tariff advocates argue that decades of globalization have hollowed out American manufacturing and left critical supply chains vulnerable to disruption. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed the dangers of depending on foreign sources for essential goods like medical supplies and semiconductors. From this perspective, higher consumer prices are a reasonable trade-off for enhanced national security and industrial resilience. The World Trade Organization, the institution created to prevent precisely this kind of tariff escalation, now finds itself largely sidelined. Trump's tariffs directly violate the WTO's core principle of non-discrimination, as enshrined in Article 1 of its founding treaty. But with the organization's dispute settlement system effectively paralyzed, the US has blocked appointments to its appellate body since 2019. There's little recourse for affected countries through official channels. This institutional vacuum creates a dangerous scenario where countries increasingly act unilaterally. Canada has already imposed retaliatory tariffs on US steel and aluminum products. The EU is preparing its own countermeasures. China has promised to fight till the end if necessary. Without the restraining influence of binding rules and effective dispute resolution, the risk of cascading retaliation grows substantially. Some countries are attempting to salvage elements of the rules-based system. The EU and 16 other countries, including China, have established an alternative dispute resolution body. More than 90 WTO members are negotiating new rules for e-commerce. But these efforts remain fragmentary compared to the comprehensive system that existed before. The fundamental question now is whether this represents a temporary disruption or a permanent realignment of global trade. Three scenarios appear most plausible. First, a full-blown trade war where retaliation begets counter-retaliation in an economically devastating cycle. In this scenario, global supply chains fragment into regional blocks, inflation surges, and a worldwide recession becomes likely. Historical parallels suggest this path leads to economic pain for all involved. Second, a negotiated settlement where Trump uses tariffs as leverage to secure concessions from trading partners. This was partially successful during his first term with the USMCA agreement replacing NAFTA. However, the scale and comprehensiveness of current tariffs make bilateral deals much more challenging to achieve. Third, the emergence of a new multilateral framework without US leadership. As The Economist notes, even without China, the open market bloc is big enough to rebuild a trade order from the wreckage of Mr. Trump's war. For ordinary citizens worldwide, these abstract trade policies translate into concrete economic realities. American consumers will likely see higher prices across a wide range of products, from electronics to clothing to food. According to Kiplinger, the auto tariffs alone could add $3,000 to the cost of US-manufactured vehicles and $6,000 to imported models. For businesses, the impact varies dramatically by sector. Companies with global supply chains face difficult decisions about whether to absorb tariff costs, pass them to consumers, or undertake costly reorganizations of their operations. Financial markets have already begun pricing in these disruptions, with the S&P 500 experiencing its worst quarter since 2022. For workers, the picture is mixed. Some in protected industries may benefit from reduced foreign competition, but those in export-oriented sectors or industries dependent on imported components will likely face headwinds. According to Tax Foundation analysis, the net effect of comprehensive tariffs is typically negative for overall employment. Whatever one's view on the wisdom of Trump's tariffs, there's little question that April 2, 2025 marks a pivotal moment in economic history, perhaps the most significant since the creation of the Bretton Woods system in 1944 or its collapse in 1971. For nearly 80 years, the United States championed a rules-based trading system built on increasingly open markets. That era appears to be ending. What replaces it? Whether a fragmented world of competing blocs, a new multilateral order without American leadership, or something else entirely, will shape the economic prospects of billions of people for decades to come. As European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde observed, "We're entering an inverted world where old assumptions no longer hold." Navigating this new reality requires understanding not just the mechanics of tariffs and their immediate economic impacts, but the deeper power shifts they both reflect and accelerate. If you've found this analysis valuable, please subscribe to our channel for ongoing coverage of these developments and their implications. The global economic landscape is being redrawn before our eyes, and understanding these changes is essential for anyone seeking to make sense of our uncertain future.